Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Commander Celan Nerio. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial and students on behalf of the following school. From Western Australia, Goldfields Baptist College, Kalgoorlie. If able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Students, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the hearts of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Lieutenant Charles Basil Trevor Davey. Charles Davey, known as Charlie, was born on the 16th of July, 1889. The second son of William and Mary Davey of Kerrang, Victoria. His father, a native of Cornwall in England, was the proprietor and editor of the Kerrang Observer. Davey was educated locally and later qualified as an accountant and worked as foreman in the printing department of the Observer. Charlie Davey had been keenly interested in the military from his childhood. In 1907, at the age of 18, he joined the Victorian Rangers as a private and was promoted to corporal 2 years later. In 1912, the Compulsory Training Act came into force and Davey received provisional commission, being formally appointed second lieutenant after passing his examination. The following year, he became the senior officer at Kerrang, and on the 1st of July 1914, he was gazetted as a first lieutenant. Just over a month later, war broke out in Europe, and Charlie Davey was among the first to enlist. He left with the 7th Battalion in the 1st Contingent, writing letters home, which his father published in the Observer. He seemed to enjoy the voyage on board the troop ship Hororata, writing, "We are now 5 weeks since we left Broadmeadows, and the time seems as if it were only a week ago. I can scarcely think it is so long since we left Victoria. Time passes very quickly here as there is always something to do, so much moving about." The 7th Battalion was sent to Egypt to continue training in the desert. Lieutenant Davey wrote, "If anyone had told us this time last year that so many Australians would have spent this Christmas in Egypt and that I should have devoted a portion of mine upon the top of the Great Pyramid, we should have looked upon such a great prophet with pity, if nothing else." He was busy, but despite telling his father that our camp life and work take up all our time, there is not much left for sightseeing. In late February, he and his friend, Lieutenant Charlie Dennehy, found time to visit parts of Cairo they had not yet seen. From late February 1915, Charlie Davey began writing letters that he thought would be his last from Mena Camp in Egypt. Finally, on the 3rd of April, he wrote, "The mail closes in a quarter of an hour, and I have no time to write a letter. We have just got orders to leave here tomorrow morning. We do not know where we are going, nor what might happen to us, but we will hope for the best. Goodbye all. Goodbye everybody in Kerrang. Your loving Charles." 3 weeks later, the 7th Battalion landed on Gallipoli. Writing with a bullet wound to his arm, Charlie Davey's mate, Charles Dennehy, described what happened on the morning of the 25th of April, 1915. "We landed under a hail of shrapnel and drove the Turks back. We won ridge after ridge until we could advance no further. Charlie was on the right flank and did excellent service. He and his men captured a Turkish gun. All day the fight went on. Towards evening, Charlie got the order to retire and dig in, which he did. All night we dug and repelled 4 attacks. Next morning, there was no chance of sleep during the night. We advanced again, having been reinforced. During that day, we had another hard time of it. In fact, the whole engagement was a fierce, terrible affair, with great odds against us. It was during the afternoon that Charlie was hit, the bullet entering the thigh and travelling up the body. He called to his men, 'Go on, boys, get forward.' And they did. It was night when they got him to the beach and transferred him to the hospital ship. He bore up well and was quite bright and cheerful, but internal hemorrhage set in, and he passed over peacefully and calmly. Next day, he was buried at sea, one day out from Alexandria. William Davey received many letters of condolence on the loss of his son and published many of them in the newspapers. Gunnar Clayton wrote, "I cannot tell you in writing how sorry I am for Charlie Davey, but if I do get the chance, the knowledge that the enemy has injured my friends will stir me on to avenge them." Private Egan wrote, "Charlie Davey was a boshter chap, one of the best." Today, Charlie Davey is commemorated on the Lone Pine Memorial on Gallipoli. He was 25 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his name on the Lone Pine Memorial is located today beside the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lieutenant Charles Basil Trevor Davey, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, had thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. Thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and we wish you all a very good evening.